Welcome everyone to Already Cancelled. I'm Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation Season 4 Episode 15. It's called First Contact. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. So this is an interesting episode because it is a story of First Contact. It's a story of the Enterprise being tasked with making first contact with a civilization that's about to enter the stage where they've got warp space capabilities where they can travel to other systems and will likely then start running into other species and other planets. But what I think makes this interesting is that it actually tackles it from the perspective of the planet itself. And I'd say the main characters of this episode are in fact the Chancellor, who's like the world leader on this planet, and the scientist who's pushing the space program, as well as a couple other characters. And even once it introduces, because there's obviously one Enterprise character, Riker's down there, sort of, that's the reveal at the end of the opening scene, but even once it introduces other characters like Picard and Troy, it still kind of keeps going back to the planet as if it's their episode, as opposed to then switching to feeling like it's, we're following Picard and crew from their side of things. So a very interesting take here. So what did you think of First Contact?
It's not bad. A lot of nice ideas. Really like kind of what it's playing with. Its kind of story and the point. I think it's a little bit, just not quite right in the pacing department. Something that feels a little bit off with it to me. I'm trying to put my finger on exactly what it is. I think it's maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit too slow in the first half, and then it ramps up a little bit too much after a certain point. It kind of feels like a bit of a switch rather than a gradual incline up.
I can't really say I share that perspective. I never really noticed any such thing. I happen to really like this episode. In fact, I think this is maybe going to combat the O'Brien episode as best of the season so far. I think this one's actually pretty exceptional. Partly because it's a look into this process of first contact, and given it this, I mean, we've obviously had hints of first contact here or there throughout Star Trek thus far, but this really kind of centers in on the actual, because it's always this like, oh, we've triggered first contact too early, so now we have to deal with the consequences and try and fix it. We've had that a couple of times, or we've had other things like that. This was like, no, this civilization are about to legitimately need to be entered into the universal like diplomatic world, and this is the first. And I actually really appreciated the reference later on in the episode when Picard says, yeah, the first contact with the Klingons went a little bit rough, so it ended with decades of war. So we made this controversial choice to always kind of try to spy on the planets first, just so we understand who they are, so we can understand the best approach to a peaceful approach. Which, you get why they're skeptical when they hear, wait, you've had someone pretending to be one of us on our surface. Like, you get why that sounds fishy.
Yeah,
but
and it's not even just the one that they've got in Riker. It's that, they've had teams down there for years, kind of going through this stuff methodically.
Yeah. There's some really fun because I wasn't necessarily even taking this as a sort of allegory for Earth, even though, I mean, clearly their technological point where they're not like an ancient civilization or anything like that, and they're just on the cusp of warp space travel, so they're maybe just a little bit more advanced than Earth. But later on in the episode, when it really started to get to the nitty gritty of how they're reacting to people coming down, and then when it talks about, well, what about these stories of one of us being in one of your medical facilities, and they talk about how, well, no one will believe them, it'll just become kind of a myth that people will laugh off, and I'm like, are Star Trek writers insinuating that Roswell was actually something like this? Because that's
quite
what it sounds
possibly.
like.
It does sound a lot like that. And in fact, there's a point at the end of the episode when the Chancellor kind of makes his decision. He's like, do you know what? People just aren't ready for this. And I'm like, yeah, okay, you're really kind of making the point that this is Earth, right, at this point.
Yeah, which I don't think is a problem. I want to make that clear.
No, I don't either. I don't dislike that either.
If anything, it just enriched it a little bit more by the end, where I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, Earth's not really ready yet. Because, I mean, much of the episode, like I say, it focuses on these characters. It focuses on the Chancellor and Marastas, the scientist who's pushing for warp travel. And at the end of the episode, once the decision's been made that we're not ready for this and we're just going to have to ask you to leave, she wants to stay in the Enterprise, and Picard's okay with it, and even the Chancellor, who is a fairly understandable guy. Like, he's been very considerate of everything. He's been skeptical and suspicious at points when he's had cause to, but he's always tried to think it through, and he's always tried to sort of see it from Picard's perspective. And when he makes this choice at the end, it's one of like, it's one of wisdom. It's not out of anything else. It's like, no, I'm acknowledging that our people are not ready for this shit.
Yeah, he makes the call that we're going to postpone the entire warp scientific research. We're going to channel those funds that we could have been that we kind of had going towards that, and we were right on the cusp of doing it anyway. But we're going to put that towards social reform and education, and maybe make sure we're better as a society so that we can be ready for this in the future.
Yeah, but the point being is that she asked to stay, and he admits that, like, she's going to have to lie because of what we're doing now, and she's never going to feel fulfilled. Like, it's probably better for her to leave now, because she has discovered this. She's been on the ship, she's been on the Enterprise, she's been proven right. She's never going to be satisfied living here in a lie anymore. Like, there's no interest for her there. So he admits that, and Picard says, okay, Worf, get her some quarters.
He's got no real qualms with it. He's like, are you sure about this? You won't be able to come back, probably.
Honestly, it's not a million miles away from Saru and Discovery. There's definitely some correlations to the Federation rather accepting him and be like, well, you've discovered us. Your planet's not really there yet, but
yeah, this is a little, I think I'd say, less controversial than Saru in the sense of, this was, they were ready for first contact. As a civilization, we had deemed them ready. And they chose themselves not to be, but maybe some of them are ready. It kind of works.
Some, but not enough. It's kind of the democratic way of looking at it, where, okay, there's enough people who are sensible and will be understanding, but there's too many who are going to just be bigoted, who are just going to see outsiders, and it's going to become a conflict. And it's the head of security or defense, whatever his role is, who's like really paranoid all episode. He's like, no,
trying to martyr himself by the end.
Yeah, he tries to like frame Riker for trying to kill him, but he doesn't know how to change the phaser to off stuns, so it ends up sort of backfiring. Not literally. I don't think
it's that he doesn't know how; it's that he doesn't even realize there is a stun setting.
Well, yeah, of course that's what I mean, but the idea doesn't even know that there's a stun function, and therefore it backfires. Again, not literally.
Yeah.
But and even like Crusher, when she eventually gets a hold of him to fix him, because she has to be the one to, and she's like, yeah, he's fine. It was on stun, but she points out that the way the blast hit him, like he had to have his own hand on it, like when it went off, and yeah, there's a possibility they were fighting over the weapon and it went off, but she's like, yeah, but Riker was like doped up, and because Riker gets attacked halfway through this episode. We have to talk about Riker's journey in this. So the opening scene of this is very it's almost like a really good homage to a Twilight Zone episode called Eye of the Beholder, and spoilers for that episode if you've not seen it, but the whole premise of that episode, and it's a really artistically shot episode where everything's shot from the neck down, you never see anyone's faces. But the main character's all in bandages, right? Her head's all in bandages. She's in the hospital, and she's there for an operation because of how ugly she is. And the twist at the end of the episode, when the bandages come off, is that she just looks like a normal human. She's like a beautiful woman. And the reveal is that everyone who have been seen from the neck down have got really these weird, like, it's like a different planet with different, it's not literally a different planet. It's still meant to be this Earth on a different universe, say. But the twist being that, no, to us she looks normal, and to all these other people look like demons you'd get in another show, but here they're beautiful and she's the ugly one. And this kind of, that doesn't hide them in this bit to a very great extent, but it's the idea that we're in one of their hospitals, and it really sets you up for this as an episode from their perspective, because it's like, okay, they're like, wait, this guy's got weird hands, what's going on? And then it's revealed at the end of the scene this is Riker, who's in one of their hospitals, and they don't know what he is, they're confused. So it sets up a lot of the ideas of the episode, but I thought it's a really interesting introduction into the whole thing. But Riker, because he's weird enough, the head doctor is actually, again, a pretty noble guy. He kind of falls into the Chancellor's kind of way of thinking, where, okay, there's some weird things going on here, but I took an oath to do no harm, and I'm going to, and he sort of stands his ground on that later when he's confronted with basically.
It's good to know that every sufficiently advanced society has a Hippocratic oath.
Yeah, well. But he's asked to do something to wake Riker up so he can be questioned, but it'll probably kill him because of the amount of drugs he's having to pump into his system, and he refuses to do it. So that's something that happens later on. So it makes you kind of appreciate and like him. But Riker, first of all, though, he does get better from his original injuries when he was brought in, and he wants to try and escape. And out of nowhere, Lilith Crane walks in. If you don't recognize the actress, she played Lilith on Frasier and Cheers as well, I suppose. And she is one of these aliens. Her voice is very recognizable.
It is, isn't it? It just cuts straight through you.
Almost to the point where it almost took me out of the scene because it's Lilith and it's her voice, and even though the dialogue's not written to sound like Lilith, like she has such a distinct voice that it sounded like Lilith. I was like, this is weird. Like I get
it. Some people have those voices and you associate them with certain roles that there's no getting away from it. Yeah,
she'll always be kind of a Morticia Addams style like presence, no matter how hard she tries to be warm and friendly or otherwise. I don't know, she's always going to have that.
I don't think it helps that she's a little bit of an oddball even in this scene.
She is an oddball, yeah. She essentially says you're an alien, aren't you? Because the rumors are starting to spread outside. There's a lot of guards, they're all talking. And she says, look, I'll help you escape on one condition. And he's like, sure, what? He's like, have sex with me first. He's like, wait, what? What was that? He's like, I've always wanted to have sex with an alien. What? Which, I think context is important here. This is a civilization that up until this point, aliens are only something they've had in fiction, just like us.
Yes.
So her saying, I've always wanted to have sex with an alien, just imagine the sort of person on Earth right now who would say that. That's how weird she is.
There are plenty of them, though, let's be honest.
Not that many.
I bet there are.
In the grand scheme of
things. I bet
you're
underestimating it vastly.
Well, they're still weirdos, though. The point I'm making...
yeah, I'm not disputing that.
The point I'm making is you can actually directly gauge how weird this is that she's saying this based on the real world, because our civilization and where we are is very similar to this civilization and where they are in the context of this episode. So you get it. You get like how bizarre this is. And he says, well, that may not work because, there's some differences to like how you would do it. And she's like, well, I can't wait to find out. And to my surprise, the camera just like cuts to an exterior shot, and then they come out of the room later. And I'm like, wait, did it happen?
There's a very strong implication that Riker went through with it.
Yes.
Because I think the final shot is her kind of with his fingers, kind of being all seductive on the fingers, and then cuts outside. And it definitely plays like he went through with it.
All for nothing, might I add, because he gets caught almost immediately in the hallways.
Not her fault, admittedly. She does hold up her end of the bargain.
I mean, she does. I think, honestly, she really had to think through like how much effort she was going to put into this, because all she really did was distract the one guard that was right outside the room. She did nothing to maintain that he'd have a path out of the building.
Yeah.
He gets caught. He doesn't even get to the elevator. He's still on the same floor.
Yeah. Doesn't go that well.
But he gets beat up so badly that he's basically dying from his wounds, and that's why he's in such a bad state for the rest of the episode. But I think the rest of the episode does a really good job of setting up the Chancellor and setting up this, head of defense, and him being so skeptical, and this planet, the people aren't ready for the idea that they're the center of the universe to be challenged, and the idea that there's something out there that will disprove that notion. And again, the Chancellor, like when he meets Picard and Picard comes in, and he's very, again, open-minded when he's told about all this, and because I think the way he puts it is that, this morning I thought I was the leader of the universe, and then by the afternoon I find out I'm just a voice in the chorus. That's the exact line he uses. He talks about his family and talks about all these things. The scenes with Picard and him, like kind of like talking, and I think they're really well done, because the Chancellor says, these are the sort of things that someone who was planning to like betray us or planning something might say if they're trying to like trick us.
And Picard's like, yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, but you gotta just learn to trust.
Yeah, you can't just miraculously have that happen.
Yeah, and Picard understands this as well. He's like, I get why you're skeptical here. I get why you don't trust me immediately. Why would you? I'm a random alien who's just shown up and gone, hey, here's some cool stuff.
And it's the same as well, because the whole Riker thing is kept secret. Marista knows, because they ask her about him, and she says, look, don't tell the Chancellor about this element, that you've got someone on the surface, because that'll be enough to make him suspicious, and the others that are high up in the government will use that to drive a political motivation. And so I liked how it was touching on all these ideas. I think by the end as well, the idea that they don't finish making first contact, and the mature choice is made that, look, clearly what happened in the hospital with someone trying to martyr themselves to make sure we saw you as the enemy is a sign that perhaps we're not completely ready for this, that there's too many people who are not going to be willing to make this transition. And one day, hopefully, when we're still both alive, you can come back and we can finish this, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave. And Picard accepts, and it's it's this hopeful idea for the
very
future.
civil, isn't it?
Yeah. And I liked it because it wasn't necessarily the resolution I was expecting. I think
I agree with that. I like the idea of, in this case, the Chancellor recognizing their society would be a detriment to the galactic society, right? And just throwing them in there would be a detriment to them. And it's like, do you know what? No, we need to work on our own society first. So I'm gonna, we're gonna do education, social programs, get better as a society and more accepting, and then we'll be ready, and then we'll come join you.
Yeah,
it was an interesting choice. I really appreciate it.
It makes you like him a lot as well, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think Marisa comes off quite well in the sense that she has been a little bit in a rush to like move on, but at the same time, you completely understand why she would be just like in a cage if she stayed. Like, I mean, not literally, but she'd feel like she was in a cage because she knows this world exists. She knows this open universe exists, and to be cut off from it, is maddening. And I think I loved that it didn't dwell too much on the specific technology. Obviously, the phaser gets brought up. Chancellor does meet Data, and he's like, "Oh wait, you're a machine." He's like, "Well, artificial life form would be more accurate." I think it didn't dwell too much on the actual tech, because I think the point isn't so much that it's Star Trek tech. The whole point is that this is an Earth-like world just seeing something more advanced.
Yeah, I think like if we looked at these things now, like let's just say an alien showed up to us and had this tech, we'd be like, "Oh, this is interesting." Don't get me wrong, because it would be, but it wouldn't be inconceivable to us. It's kind of like the idea if you went back 300 years and showed them a telephone, like that would be inconceivable.
Oh, sure, yeah, that'd be absolutely mind-numbing. I think
whereas to us now, we can kind of we're conditioned enough that we can understand it, even if we're not at that level ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just because like movies and TV and science fiction, but if someone used like a teleportation beam to come in, like, I think we'd obviously be in shock because we'd never seen anything close to that working, but it wouldn't be that long before we just start asking questions about it and understanding at least conceptually what it is, and therefore, okay, how does this work? How did you do this? Like, what?
Right, yeah. And I think it's reasonable to assume that they're on a similar path.
Yeah.
They have their own fiction. They already have stories about aliens. Otherwise, she wouldn't have wanted to bang one.
Yeah,
right?
precisely.
So,
yes.
It's not unreasonable to assume they have a similar idea of technology to us in their fiction. Maybe not the exact specifics, but yeah, close enough.
Yeah, she's the only person on that planet who's banged a human. That's quite a claim right now.
It is. She'll never be able to tell anyone.
Well, she might. She'll be one of those people on those like magazine covers saying, "I had sex with an alien and I've had its baby."
She will, yeah.
That's what she is. Maybe that's why, because that is actually, if I have a complaint, is that I did get a kick out of that scene with her and like the whole.
But it felt like it came out of nowhere and was just random.
It felt tonally a little inconsistent with a fairly down to earth, but like it felt like a really nuanced episode that wasn't that over the top. And then that scene, like, "Oh well, I'll help you escape if you have sex with me." I was like, okay, this was a little bit like a different tone.
It felt like we slipped into like a 50s sci-fi movie or something.
Yeah. I get a kick out of it though, so I can't. I can't complain too much.
Maybe with the ending, you're right. Maybe it makes more sense because okay, if this society is just going to have stories of this what happened, now you'll have people going, I was probed and so on.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think all those things are done really smart to kind of make it feel like, this is going to be this world's Roswell. And the question is how long is it from Roswell to when First Contact is actually made? In the context of Star Trek, just because I vaguely remember from the movie First Contact, I think it's later this century that we're in. It's like 2080 or something like that. I don't know, something like that. 2070, 2080, something in that range.
Frankly, a little ambitious given the last handful of years.
I'm sure it'll be mentioned. It's been mentioned.
It probably already has been, yeah.
Yeah, but because that movie revolves around it, that's where I remember it from.
Oh, that makes sense. But I'm sure it's probably been mentioned at some random point in the past.
Probably. Well, Zephyr Cochrane's been mentioned at least a couple of times, so and that's what he's all involved in. So, I think this episode is a really interesting take on a concept that's already been around pretty much for the entirety of Star Trek, not even just Next Gen, although definitely Next Gen's version is a lot more diplomatic and calm than what Kirk would have been.
I'm shocked.
Whooshing into a new planet. No wonder the Klingon one went badly if Kirk was involved.
That said, if Kirk was involved, how many more aliens would have been banged?
He'd have been one making the offer, though.
He would, yeah.
Yeah, Riker was coerced into it here, but Kirk would have been the one to be like, hey, look, would any alien ladies like a bit of human?
Let's be honest, though. I don't think it took all that much convincing for Riker here.
I don't know. I think Riker, while he's a bit of a ladies' man, I think he's not that flippant with his endeavours.
Usually I would agree, but it took him about 45 seconds here to be convinced.
He was a bit out of it. He was still on drugs, okay? He was not
Sure.
at his full capacity.
I hope Troy brings this up at some point in the future, and he's like, I was on drugs.
I don't know, maybe just Lilith's voice just got cut through to him.
Maybe it did.
Just cut through to him. It always lured Fraser back in, despite the fact that Lilith was always presented as the Antichrist on that show. But they always ended up having those random weekends together at various points in the show.
It's true.
It always happened. Yeah, no, it's funny. It's because that's the thing when Crusher beams there into the hospital room, because of if it turns out that Picard is in the counselor or the Chancellor have agreed to cooperate to like save him and stop all this, Worf comes in with her, as security, and I'm like, okay, they've just seen that human for the first time, and then Klingon beams into the room.
Yeah, you've seen one alien, you've seen them all.
Apparently, but. No, I think it's a really solid exploration. Like I say, I love that it never shifts to the perspective of Picard. Picard always enters the scenes as the outsider. He's always not the character we're following. We never see Picard with like Data or whoever on the Enterprise talking about what to do or try to save Riker. We're purely in the conspiracy of the characters on the ground. We're purely with them and talking about how to handle this situation. And obviously, like any Trek episode, the whole point of this is it's supposed to say more about our characters than it is about the guest characters, and I think it still does. I think the way Picard handles this and the way he tries to let them make their choices does reinforce the ideas of what this is supposed to be about. Yeah,
I think while you're not wrong, I think this is a particular unusual exception to the rule where it's not about the guest characters per se, but more about the strong analogy with Earth, and that's kind of what it's about more than any character on either side.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of both there. It's one of those things where the allegory is so strong that it almost maybe overpowers everything else, but I don't think that necessarily takes away from what it's actually saying about how our characters actually like get involved here or what they're trying to do. It's maybe I almost wonder if this episode in some way is the writers who have maybe had conversations in the past about poking holes in the show's own rules and saying, well, what if we actually do an episode exploring this to see how it actually works? Because we never really went through it proper, like beat for beat like this from this kind of like, not quite a success obviously by the end, but I'd say successful in the sense that it didn't end up at war. I mean that's
that's one way of measuring success for sure.
It's definitely it's not a critical failure. They didn't roll on,
do you know what?
Didn't roll on that one.
If that is the bar for success, I can now class everything I've ever done in my life as successful. So
hey, context is everything. I'm not saying it's a complete success, but it's not a natural one either.
Yeah. It's an okay resolution, let's be honest.
As an episode of Star Trek, as an episode of Star Trek, I think it's a fantastic resolution.
Yeah, I was about to specify. I don't mean that from a narrative, as an enjoyment fact that it's only an okay. I meant an in context story. It's an okay resolution for the characters.
Yes, and obviously we've met many aliens, many planets throughout Star Trek, perhaps more so in the original series and Next Gen, which hasn't necessarily went into that trope as often. But again, this is a very interesting example of doing it from their perspective and therefore making them feel like more... Because I think the guest stars who are like on the planet that we tend to feel relatively minor. I think this episode sidesteps that. It actually gives me two characters. The Chancellor I think is the more interested of the two once we really get to the meat of it. But I think both him and Marista feel like main characters of this episode to the point where they don't just feel like throwaway guest stars. It feels like no, I'm invested in what choices they're going to make. I'm invested in what they're doing in the episode, which I don't usually. I'm able to say. Usually, I like the guest plots in the sense that they're facilitating whatever the main characters are going through. This episode actually manages to overcome that and makes me care about it. So
no, I absolutely agree. I think it's a very good episode. I think the pacing thing that I was kind of hitting at earlier, I think it actually starts around Riker's breakout. It's around that point where I think that scene does feel kind of random and out of nowhere at first, and we've kind of justified later, and I did still enjoy it while I was watching it, but I did feel the shift, and I think it's after that point where I felt things kind of just got quicker, and maybe it is things like Crusher and Worf both just showing up and kind of just getting on with it, and things like that kind of felt like there was a lot going on all of a sudden in that back half with contact with a lot of people, and maybe that's kind of what was kind of getting at me.
I wonder if that's just a necessity of the severity of the situation. Like,
it might well be.
They're at a breaking point where Riker's about to die, so they just have to kind of do this. And the idea that it's kind of snowballed a little bit with the defense guy who's like trying to martyr himself and create a intergalactic incident, which is going to because imagine one of the things that the Chancellor says when they're first debating it after he's like found out about the ship and Picard and all that is that the defense guy's like, what if they're actually hostile? You're being a bit naive by not thinking they are. And the Chancellor's like, I've seen their ship. If they were hostile, we'd be dead already. Like, we'd already be gone. We wouldn't stand a chance. It's a pretty
fair point.
Yeah. So it's funny because obviously skepticism's warranted. Like, anyone might be trying to trick them. It's true, but
and to be fair, he's skeptical himself with Picard. They're like, hey, I don't know if I can trust you here. But
and I think that might be the biggest success of the episode is that despite the fact that we know Picard, we know the Federation, we know the Enterprise, we know what their goal is, we know that there's nothing menacing or anything under the surface than what they're presenting. But because it gives it is from their perspective, I always felt like they justified why I was skeptical. I never felt like it was annoying that he was like not believing our characters. It always felt earned. It always felt
it felt fair. Yeah. I think it's kind of what I want to. It feels fair that he's skeptical of all this because who among us wouldn't be?
Yeah. So, no, it's a great episode. I am very pleased with it. I think it's funny because with the exception of the first one, because it was the second part of All Good Things. Not All Good Things. That's the finale. Best of Both Worlds. That's the one I'm trying to say.
Yes.
We get the second part of that at the start of the season, and I mentioned just a couple episodes ago that season 4 has been solid enough. There's been a lot of fun, fine episodes, but it's really just the last few where I feel like we've had a couple of great ones, and I think this is an added feather in the cap. I think season 4 has kind of really hit a stride here in the middle.
Yeah, I don't think this is quite up with the standard of like the O'Brien one, for example. For me, I know you said earlier that it was kind of up there for you. I think it's a little bit like the rung below for me, but it is certainly a step above the majority of the first half of the season for sure. Yeah. It does feel like it was, again, not bad. The episodes were fine, but it was kind of just in a bit of a routine, a rut. Like, okay, these are just average episodes, and we're in a place now where average episodes are still pretty decent. But it's something like 3 out of the last 4 have been kind of hitting into that. Oh, this is actually really good territory.
Yeah, the O'Brien one, the last one was Clues. That was really good, and then this one here, really good stuff. So, looking ahead to next time though, we have an episode called Galaxy's Child. We'll see. I'm always a little bit hesitant when the children are involved in a Star Trek episode. As Geordi LaForge finally meets the real Dr. Leah Brahms. Oh God. Oh God. Do you remember his AI like?
I do, and I remember us having a bit of a debate as to whether or not they were even still alive at the time.
I don't even remember what side of the debate I was on, to be honest.
I don't either. I just remember having a debate about it. I don't know who won.
Well, she's there.
Yeah.
But also, the word Brahms, I really hate that word. How dare they?
Every time you see it, you shudder a little bit, don't you?
Yes. So he meets the real Dr. Leah Brahms. A tragic first contact leaves the Enterprise with a gigantic galactic infant sucking the ship's energy. Oh, wait, you know what? When the child is a giant galactic fish, I'm a bit more into it.
I like how we went from this first contact episode to that. I mean, I haven't even seen it yet, but they sound worlds apart.
Oh yeah, I've got a funny feeling though when they say first contact here, they don't mean like going through the process of like organised first contact. I imagine they just run into this thing.
Yes, I assume it is a lot more random.
The image on IMDb though is that does look, yeah, it looks like a fish sticking out the back of the Enterprise, so that'll be an interesting.
I can't wait to see that.
Interesting visual. And not a whole fish, just the back half of like a fish.
Oh, just the back half of a fish. That makes it all better.
Back of the saucer section to specify, not all the way back at the engines.
Okay.
Just to be clear.
It's not blowing its own body out then.
No. But there you go. That's getting a fishy time. We're getting Leah Brahms and a giant galactic fish. So,
I foresee no way this episode can disappoint us.
I could see about 50 different ways it could disappoint us at this point.
Oh, I don't know. Giant fish. It's got a lot to go downhill.
All right, that is been our discussion of First Contact. Not the movie, of course. We'll get to that after the show's done. So let us know what you thought of this one in the comments below. Please do hit the like button. Liking is super important on YouTube, and it lets us know you like the content, and it'll keep coming. But more importantly, it lets YouTube know that you like it, and therefore they'll recommend us out more, and we'll show up in more recommended feeds and things like that. You can support us with some monies if you want to, and if you can, over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. For as little as $1 per month, you get some bonuses. And of course, at $5 or more, you get early access to some stuff, including the Star Trek reviews. So go and have a look and see if you're interested over there. Catch us on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. But otherwise, that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Star Trek. And somewhere out there, Wesley Crusher is making first contact with the ladies.